Governments have a lot of trouble dealing with this new influx of internet properties, which are challenging, you might say, government jurisdiction. Not necessarily the jurisdiction, but precedents, where we're used to properties being leased out under an agreement where you have a lease and you have a rental system and you have all sorts of different, government-sponsored contracts that determine how business is to be handled. The internet doesn't really care about regulation, though. That's the interesting thing about internet businesses. The internet is highly regulated in the sense that the internet, the World Wide Web, must adhere to very specific standards in the terms of how, HTTP works and IP addresses can't collide. And there's all sorts of different, regulation there. But that's less regulation and more just the nature of how it is. When I'm talking about regulation, I'm often talking about government regulation, and sometimes even corporate regulation, which can cause problems too, but mostly government regulation. And here in Chattanooga, we have a bit of a conundrum. It shouldn't be a conundrum, but it is a conundrum. And this is exactly the same conundrum that we had before with Uber. And no one seems to be making this parallel, so I'm going to go ahead and make it because I like to be the contrarian who sees things that either other people don't or refuse to recognize, so whatever. But there's a big parallel between Airbnb and Uber. The parallel is this. Back, I think it was about a year or two ago, David Tulis and I, and you probably just heard David Tulis, he's on from 9 to 11. He does an excellent show where he talks about local economy and free markets, and he knows a lot more about the whole local economy structure and how that should work than I do. So if you're looking for actual real talks about local economy, look to David Tulis. He's on from 9 to 11, and he does Facebook videos and YouTube live streams very regularly here on Hot News Talk Radio. So definitely check him out. But something that he and I talked about maybe a year ago on the air together, we talked about Uber. And Uber, in case you're not familiar, is a ride-sharing company. And it's sort of decentralized in the sense that you can rent out your car basically whenever you feel like it. And you do have to adhere to certain Uber corporate structures. But other than that, it's basically anarchy in a lot of ways. You can use a car you want, the car you own, as long as it's approved by Uber. You can drive your style. You can get to the place the way you want to get to the place. And it hires, it doesn't really have employees. You're not an employee of Uber. You're sort of a contractor. And I would much prefer contractors over employees in almost every aspect of business, because contractors probably get the job done a lot better sometimes. But that's a topic for a whole nother day. The thing with Uber was, here in Chattanooga, everyone kind of freaked out in city government when Uber happened, when Uber became a thing that people were aware of. Now, Uber's been around for a long time, but for some reason in Chattanooga, they just sort of caught on that it was real. And they're like, oh, no, Uber's a real thing that we have to now deal with. But what David and I were talking about is you don't have to deal with it as a city government, or as a county government, or really as a government at all. You would have to deal with Uber if there was a damage, right? Because that's what government tends to be there for, is if there's a damage or there's a claim, government steps in and oversees the process of righting that wrong, right? That's why you have the court system, and that's why you have a sheriff. An Uber driver crashes into you, well, then that Uber driver is now responsible for crashing into you. Not so much Uber, but the Uber driver certainly is. Or if it came out that Uber was, say, unfairly paying someone, then, that would be an issue for government perhaps to step in. But barring that, and that's even stepping on the toes of free market, I would argue, but barring that, there's really nothing that the city or county government, or the federal government for that matter, or the state government should have to say about Uber. Why? And the same thing happens with Airbnb. Now, I think the catalyst for this argument about Airbnb comes from some of the more upscale communities in, say, Lookout Mountain, Georgia, has had some issues. Signal Mountain has had some issues with Airbnb, where people are worried that you may have ne'er-do-wells who come to live in your city, and what a big problem that might be if you have some ne'er-do-well who wants to live in a house for a week that's next to you. People were having was, there might be someone who rents out their house as essentially a bed and breakfast, and doesn't actually live there and operates a business without a license. That's where the big, problem comes in, operating a business without a license, which I don't really care about. You operate a business without a license, who cares It's all about tax liability, and it's all such a scheme to get money out of people. And then you have the argument, well, if all the other people have to do it, why shouldn't you? Well, that's fair enough, except, if all the other people were jumping off of a cliff, would you too? If you're going to avoid taxes, you're going to avoid taxes. Smart people avoid taxes. Now, they avoid them. They don't necessarily evade them, but smart people avoid taxes as much as possible because you don't want to have to pay them. You're paying way more than your quote-unquote fair share with a lot of other services that you use, like, say, sales tax or whatever income tax you may pay, if any. You're way more than putting in your fair share with taxes. Trust me, it's not worth worrying about with, is your neighbor paying the right amount of taxes? Has his property been assessed properly? Don't worry about that. It's none of your business. But people like to make it their business. And the city council has been asked, I think, by some higher-end community members to make Airbnb its business. Airbnb must now be the business of the city council and of the county commission and of the state government and of the federal government, and it now must be a big issue for regulators. But what good have regulators ever done, really? I mean, you might make some argument about, there was a regulator who said something about how cars have to be safe, and so that's good regulation. Well, sure. But I'm sure the companies would have done that anyway to make sure they don't get the pantsuit off of them by someone who dies because of an exploding airbag or some such nonsense. It's in a free market system, I like to think anyway, these problems would fix themselves. But it's hard to tell because I've never lived in a real free market system. We like to pretend, oh, look how free market America is, but it is, but it's not. The United States is very free market minded, very free enterprise minded, but the government really isn't. Even here in Chattanooga, which does value its small businesses quite a lot, it doesn't make any sense. Where you have the city government and the county government saying, oh, we need to regulate this. City Councilman Anderson has been very vocal about regulating Uber. And I'm not sure why. He just really wants to regulate Uber. And I really do believe that the two things overlap, Uber and Airbnb, because the mentalities are the same. And here's my solution, because radio show hosts always talk about problems. They always rail against problems, but they never bring up any solutions. And I think that's the big problem with most radio show hosts is they have tons of problems, but they never have any solutions. Yeah, you listen to a lot of mainstream radio show hosts, especially who are syndicated, and they rail against the government and they rail against, look at what's going on, but they never really have any solution to the problem. My solution is actually very simple. And if I were elected, I would implement this solution. You don't do anything. The best action is inaction in this case. Just don't do anything. Stop screwing around. That's the best solution. And we keep seeing this in city government where they want to regulate this and that. Just stop. Quit regulating things. Seriously. Airbnb is an issue, perhaps, that an individual can figure out, right? If there is a problem where a property owner is renting out his property to people who cause damage to your property somehow, okay? Now you have a problem with that homeowner. That's not an Airbnb problem. That's a homeowner versus homeowner problem. And you get so many of these, oh, I've got to put my nose in everybody's business, rich, hoity-toity, limousine liberals who want to get all butthurt about, oh, someone's having free enterprise in my neighborhood, not in my backyard, say I. And so they commission, they go to the city government and say, oh, please, it's terrible that this person has some 20-something frat kids live in his house for a week. And they played loud music one time, and I didn't have the gonads to go over there and ask them to stop. So please, government, do something for me. Come on. And we see it so much where you got these people who are afraid of confrontation. They want confrontation by proxy, where I want someone else to do things for me. That's not how I grew up. I don't know where these people grew up, but apparently they were brought up in an environment where you must get other people to do everything for me, or for you if you are the subject in this particular case. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's like just recently there was this big issue, and I'm actually wanting to say Larry Groen may have been endorsing this, but it was, or not so much endorsing, but bringing it up to the city council. There was the issue of alcohol being sold in movie theaters. And again, that's an individual basis problem. It's not a blanket problem where, oh no, they're selling beer during an R-rated movie. Who cares? I mean, people who really want to are going to bring drinks in anyway in a hip flask or whatever. I mean, in our college days, we probably did the same thing. Don't fool yourself and say you were perfect when you were young, because you weren't, and you probably caused trouble. I don't know why it is that everyone feels the need to stop other people from causing trouble instead of just addressing the trouble when it happens. There's always this mentality of, oh, we have to prevent this, we have to prevent this. But why is it your business to prevent things? It's not your business to prevent things. Your business is to address a problem after it's happened. There's no damage and there's no claim unless there's damage. So who cares if they let grandpa buy a Budweiser to let him get through Frozen with the grandkids, because that's the only way I could watch it. Trust me. That's the only way I could get through that movie. So who cares? Now, and it's not like the theaters are going to say, yes, buy as much beer as you possibly can, drive home drunk and die, because that's a huge liability problem. They'll tell Johnny at the counter, don't let him buy, no more than one beer per ticket. It's easy. It's an easy fix, and it's a corporate fix. It's not a city government fix. If you want to make it a city government fix, I'm not in favor of that, but that kind of regulation does make sense. I don't agree with it, but as a structure, it does make sense, where the city government can say, yeah, you can sell beer in theaters, but not this much. Okay, fine, whatever. There was a whole issue in Chattanooga the other day, probably about a month ago. There was this issue where there was an outdoor venue, and it was and I'm probably going to get some details about this wrong, but the particular business was allowed to seat people outside in an area that would normally be sidewalk or I think bike lane maybe, or perhaps it was a parking space. I don't recall. But either way, they could have people outside. Now, Chattanooga has this interesting city ordinance where you can't have open containers outside because public drinking is a statutory issue in Chattanooga. And it's a statutory issue that I'm sure everyone who's a 20-something who isn't, a teetotaler has broken at some point, because I know I have. And I'm, when I talk about drinking, by the way, I'm not someone who goes on benders and, throws back shots and goes crazy. I don't do that because that's not what I do. I have one or two beers with friends, and that's it. It's not a big deal. It's really not. In fact, it's not a deal at all, and it's not even ungodly. There's no feasible, moral, or legal issue that should be had with that. But for some reason, everyone wants to regulate even the concept of drinking. I'm over 21. I'm a responsible person for the most part. I'm not guilty of public intoxication. Why do you care? Because we have to maintain the image that Chattanooga is this clean, wonderful city where everyone is perfect and there's no such thing as crime, and we're going to deny for 10 years that there's a gang problem until it becomes convenient to acknowledge. That's Chattanooga for you. But I'm not knocking Chattanooga as a city. I'm knocking Chattanooga government as a structure and Chattanooga government in its mentality, because its mentality is all screwed up, just like most other city mentalities are. It's not just Chattanooga. It's basically everywhere. They all do it, and it's always crazy. And this is Binary, which is technically a technology show, but Airbnb and Uber are both very tech-oriented subjects because it's a smartphone app. It's a service that you use with your smartphone. I want to ride on Uber, okay? And I'm not branding any, I'm not being paid by Uber or Airbnb, or really anybody at all. So I'm not being sponsored by any of these companies by any stretch of the imagination. If I were, I would tell you, but I'm not right now. But let me tell you something. Who cares if people get ride sharing on Uber? Right? Like, why is this an issue for city government to step its nose in, to stick its nose in and have some city councilman have a 10-minute speech about why people in his district are concerned about Uber, when we all know the real reason behind any regulation is for monetary collection? It's all about revenue generation. Anyone who says anything differently is lying to you. It is about revenue generation. It's about collecting more money for the city so the city can pay for more bike lanes, or maybe some infrastructure upgrades, or maybe cleaning the Wilcox Tunnel for the 400th time, or whatever. That's what it's all about. It's about revenue generation, revenue collection. That's what this Airbnb issue is about, and that's what the Uber issue is going to be about. Was about, and that's what any future issue regarding any kind of regulation about any kind of new internet, tech savvy, cool, hip, and for the kids business. That's what it's going to be about. And don't fool yourself otherwise. It's stupid. It really is just utterly stupid that we allow ourselves to be fooled into thinking that this is anything other than revenue generation. But for some reason, we get knocked on the head and say, oh no, the city government has my best interest in mind. Even if they do, they don't. Even if the people in the city council really do believe they have your best interest in mind. And I know people on the city council, and a lot of them are great people. I'm not necessarily saying anything about the character of anyone on the city council, because I've met several of them, and they're all extremely nice, gracious people. I've met Yusuf Hakim. I've met, obviously, Sabrina. I've met Larry Groen. I've met a few others. They're good people. They're great people. I'm not having an issue with them as persons, right? As people, I don't have any issue with them whatsoever. It's what they do in the confines, right, of government. That's where you start having problems. Because I can love someone as a person, but have problems with them professionally. And it can be the other way around. I can have problems with them as a person and think they're excellent professionally. I can make that separation in my head. I'm capable of that. I had to do that for a long time. There's a guy I worked with who I could not stand, but he did a pretty good job. So I didn't really say anything about it until way later when things got out of hand. And I'm not naming any names. He's a cool guy still. I just can't work with him. And it's not his fault. It's just how it is. But it's crazy to me. We keep having people who are misguided. They're probably brought up in the public schooling system where the solution to everything is government. They're so used to fixing things with government solutions when really the solution is so easy. The solution is just don't do anything and wait until there's a problem on an individual basis. Is there a problem with an Uber driver because he was abusive towards one of his hires, one of his fares? Okay, that's a problem. Fine. But that's not an issue necessarily with Uber as a company or as a system. That's a problem with an individual. But for some odd reason, we gotta throw a blanket on these things. I don't know why they love throwing blankets on things, but they love doing it. They love doing it. Oh, look, there's this new hot topic that's in the newspaper. We've got to address it as a city council or as a county commissioner, or as a state government or as a federal government, or even as the UN maybe. It's the new hip and cool thing to be concerned about. When the solution, again, is so easy, just do nothing. That was the solution with Uber, and it would have worked, and for the most part has been working. That's the solution with Airbnb. Deal with it on an individual basis. Who cares about zoning? Just work with it. Deal with it for a while. There's not been any issue, as far as I know, with Airbnb aside from people complaining about noise or people on an individual level. That's not Airbnb's fault. It's the fault of individual people being terrible people. And people are always going to be terrible people, no matter what business we're talking about. It's hotels, motels, anything else. It's crazy. The solution is always government. But it makes sense because they're in government. And again, revenue collection. It's always revenue collection. Well, the Beacon Center in Tennessee did something kind of interesting. There was a lawsuit that was opened against the city of Nashville for this very reason. And the Tennessean has the story here, which is written by, I want to be correct here, Joey Garrison wrote a very good article on the Tennessean saying, Mayor Megan Barry's administration has tapped a consultant to review operations of the Metro Codes Department in order to identify the type of staffing, among other recommendations, needed to enforce regulations for Airbnb homes and other short-term rental properties. So now we're talking about inspection. We're talking about code enforcement. We're talking about neighbors ratting out neighbors because he might think that you have an Airbnb operation when in fact you just had some buddies over. Upcoming work includes deciding whether the codes department is best suited to carry out Airbnb enforcement. Meanwhile, the mayor has now eliminated the possibility of Nashville police being tasked with the role of Airbnb controllers. Can you imagine the Chattanooga Police Department being in charge of making sure everyone has proper bedding and doesn't have more than 3 people within 100 and something square feet in their Airbnb? Can you imagine? That would be more disastrous than the VRI. And I'm not saying that city police officers are dumb or that they can't handle code enforcement. I'm saying they shouldn't have to. You're trained as an LEO, man. You're not trained as code enforcement. How petty is that? If I was a cop, I'd be upset. If I were a cop, I would be posted on Facebook about that. That would drive me nuts. You know what? The city now wants me to be code enforcement as well as VRI and traffic tickets and everything else I have to deal with. Come on. It's putting a bigger workload on the police department than needs to be on the police department. So it's just shoveling the work onto another party, and when it doesn't work out, we'll blame the cops for it, even though it's not really their fault. It's just dumb governance and dumb regulation. But that really sums up most government, doesn't it? Dumb governance and dumb regulation. And again, nothing against the people in the city council. I just think they're making a really bad decision for the most part in saying anything at all about Airbnb. I'm glad that they're not passing new regulation, but it's going to lead to worse things. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds. We'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Cash, 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 and more cash. Rick Davis has the cash when you sell gold, silver, diamonds, rings, and jewelry. Sell Rick your precious metals today and lock in your price. Hey, Rick Davis will trade your cash for shiny, brilliant, and heavy gold. Gold cheaper now by $100 an ounce. Join the Rick Davis Silver Bonanza too. Price is so low, the Lone Ranger is bound to gallop in, Kimosabe.
Hey-ho, silver, away!
The markets are changing, so buy now. Cash, 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 and more cash for your silver and gold, gold, gold. Rick Davis, 5301 Brainerd Road. That's 5301 Brainerd Road. Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Oh, and cash, cash, cash. You know where it is.
Hey-ho, silver, away!
We're at the Cantina at Amigo's Mexican Restaurant. Yes, ma'am. 2 orders of nachos with beef and beans and 2 beers. Chattanooga loves its Amigos restaurants, but the Amigos in Hickson has something extra. NCAA, the week's big game. How about a house wine? Really good. Big name beers. Just tell Maria what you want. And here at Amigos, margaritas are popular. And well, it's only $3 a day. If you come here on a game day, Saturday, a Natty Light is only $2.25. Here at Amigos, just during NCAA, Natty Light, $2.25. Amigos Mexican Restaurant in Hickson. The happy hour is 3 to 9 today and every day. I'd say the atmosphere is festive. Look at that huge TV. It's like being amid the fans under a bright sun, but without all the heat. Stay cool. Quench your thirst. Amigos, between the Staples and Hobby Lobby. Take the table next to mine and enjoy the great NCAA game with friend or family here at the Cantina at Amigos Mexican Restaurant. Okay, it's starting.
Listen up, y'all. Ben Phillips, Home Rate Mortgage, 805-9100. I'm in the business of saving people money. And if you want to save money, pick that cell phone up right now, 805-9100. I received a call that I won't forget. The guy is a Chattanooga police officer who served our great country in the Air Force. A true American hero. Our hero is renting, which costs too much for a space too small. We helped him achieve the American dream. And the best part is this. He purchased a $180,000 home with 0 down. His payment is $200 less than what his rent was. And now he has a safe place with more space to raise his family. It's easy, and you can do it too. It just takes 10 minutes and 1 phone call. 805-9100.
Turn a house into a home.
At Eyer Optical, it's a well-known fact. When you buy 1 pair of glasses, you get a second pair absolutely free. But did you know Eyer Optical has the largest eyeglass selection in the area, with top-name brands and styles in the latest trends? Schedule your appointment with one of the doctors today for a comprehensive eye exam. And remember, when you buy 1 pair of glasses, you get a second pair absolutely free. Visit EyerOptical.com for a location near you.
Eyer Optical.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240, Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. Another gang shooting in Chattanooga Tuesday morning with a gang member shot in the arm, according to police. The one witness, Tyree T. Corley, is also arrested as a validated gang member who had warrants out for his arrest. The victim taken into custody and dragged off to the hospital as well. The suspected car described as a blue Chevrolet Impala. DA Neil Pinkston making a surprise announcement last night, and a 52-year-old Christopher Jeffrey Johnson has been arrested in a cold 20 years old from 1997. Back then, police found two bodies of two bloodied men shot in the chest many times in their house on Rosemont Drive. And now, 19 years later, a suspect arrested. In a surprise decision, the Chattanooga City Council has turned down regulation on short-term vacation rentals in Chattanooga, possibly taking into consideration a Beacon Center lawsuit in Nashville, which has set precedent. Chip Henderson and Jerry Mitchell voted for the regulation. If it's going on the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Expect lots of sunshine and warm weather out there through your afternoon. Highs back into the upper 70s to near 80. Tonight, more clouds, much milder lows, mid and upper 50s. Some clouds Thursday. Could see a passing sprinkle, but not much. Highs upper 70s with more dry and warm weather again on Friday. For lunch or dinner, come to Guthrie's, home of the original golden fried delicious chicken finger with their special world famous sauce. Open daily, locations in Trenton, Signal Mountain, Ringgold, and now 5203 Brainerd Road. That's Guthrie's. And I'm Swarm Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Ford. On AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
Volkswagen is an interesting topic because it's getting a lot of traction in the news recently, and it's getting a lot of attention for good things and bad things. You may remember recently there was the whole concern that people may be laid off from Volkswagen here locally because of the whole issue with what they're now calling, stupidly enough, Dieselgate. I don't know why they're calling it Dieselgate. They just are, because you have to put the gate suffix onto everything, I guess, now. So if I have a scandal, you can call it Russellgate, and I'll be okay with that, because that would actually be kind of funny. But this is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com. We're talking about Volkswagen and the ups and downs Volkswagen is having. Now, the down is Volkswagen has gotten final approval for a $14.7 billion with a B $billion Dieselgate settlement. Wow. U.S.-based owners, according to The Verge, of Volkswagen vehicles affected by the manufacturer's infamous emissions scandal will now be able to sell their cars back to dealerships after the company was granted final approval on its proposed $14.7 billion with a B compensation deal. Now, that might sound like a really big deal, and it might sound like something that's going to kill Volkswagen. I don't think that it is. Volkswagen seems to be running reasonably strongly right now as a entity. Yes, it does have issues with the Dieselgate. I hate saying that, but, with the whole diesel emission scandal. But so far, that's not really affected VW's ambitions in getting bigger. VW seems to really, really want that family crowd, especially the Southern family crowd. We're noticing with VW expanding its operations here in Chattanooga with the Enterprise South plant now building, or going to be building, SUVs. We're going to talk about that in half a second here too. But I want to cover the down before we get to the up, because the down is a downer and the up is an upper. Hey, I'm down. The U.S.-based owners of Volkswagen vehicles affected will now be able to sell their cars back to the dealerships, though, and that's going to cost VW a lot of money, but whatever. In addition to buyback fees, owners of the 475,000 cars implicated in the scandal, including Beetles, Passats, and Audi A3s, yes, Audi is owned by VW, released since 2009, will now get between $5,100 and $10,000 as an apology. We're sorry that you now have to not park in a low-emissions vehicle parking space. Here is $5,000 or maybe even $10,000 just to say we're sorry. So use that to, I guess, go and buy a 2005 Nissan Altima, and you'll be happy. I would be. So, yeah. People can also choose to hang on to their cars in anticipation that Volkswagen will fix the problems at its own expense and have until September of 2018 to make up their minds about what they want to do. If the company does not repair or fix at least 85% of the affected cars by June of 2019, it's on the hook for further penalties. Sorry, VW. But the good news is, and there is good news, don't worry, it's not over for VW. VW has a lot of money. Now, here's the thing with VW. VW is not just VW. VW also owns Audi, which is like the brand for cool people who want to buy the cool European car. They either buy an Audi or they buy a Renault. And most people don't even know Renault's a thing, even rich hoity-toity people. So they buy the Audi. I got myself an Audi A3. I look really cool driving it about. And I'm going to pretend that I'm on the Autobahn while driving around Enterprise South and making myself feel really cool about my new German-American-made car. That's the car people want to buy, the Audi A3 and the Audi, I can't remember the name of it because I'm bad with remembering car names, but the Audi is a high-end car, and VW could probably shut down all Volkswagen operations and still make money off of Audi. So that's not really a problem. In fact, VW is probably going to be able to replace that refund money in the next few years, especially if VW can pull off a smart marketing move and manage to sell an SUV to families who are looking at buying a new car. Oh, because a lot of people are stuck with their Chrysler minivans and don't really know what to go to. Because you've got the crossover, and the crossover is like the king of all cars right now in terms of like what people want to buy, especially families. They're always buying crossovers. Crossovers are the wagon of the 21st century, which sucks actually because I like wagons a lot. I'm still holding out on the Forester still being the Forester and the Outback still being good cars by the time I can afford to buy a new-ish car. Because I love wagons. I've got this thing about wagons, and I think it's a thing for people in my generation, younger millennials. We love wagons. I don't know why. And people who are in the generation just behind us, Gen Xers, love crossovers for some reason. I don't know what the deal is, but I like wagons, and I like, retro-ish looking cars, but not stupid-looking cars. Like the VW Beetle is the perfect retro-looking car that's also kind of cool. It's not lame. It's a cool car. And it's also still somewhat practical. But something like a old Mustang is not particularly practical, and probably the upkeep is a lot more expensive. It looks awesome, but it's really expensive to maintain. So if you have the choice between the two, you're probably going to go for the Beetle. Beetle's that cool old car, and it's a Volkswagen car. So hey, but no, the whole issue with the whole car thing can probably just be summed up with it'll blow over. Because it probably will. Now, you can't, people always say, oh, I know the market trend is going to be this or that. People don't know market trends for the most part. They like to pretend they do, but most of the time they don't, especially when it comes to technology and sometimes when it comes to cars. Because with cars, you have a limited selection. With technology, there's always some new guy who's going to step in and come out with the Apple II and ruin everything for IBM in the modern day. So there's always that company that can do that. So technology is way more unstable in terms of what the new trend is going to be than, say, the car manufacturers are. But there is good news about the car manufacturers today here in the 21st century here in Chattanooga. Volkswagen has started Chattanooga-built SUV, a reveal of it with internet videos that show how cool and hip and awesome the new SUVs are, and they do look pretty cool. Volkswagen plans a series of videos to reveal the new mid-sized SUV being built here in Chattanooga at Enterprise South and the whole Volkswagen area. Good stuff, really cool, bringing jobs to the local area. The first of 8 installments just hit the internet. Origins, like Origin Software. Origins explores how the vehicle went from concept to creation, including why VW changed from the Cross Blue concept to a bigger, bolder vehicle, because it's an American car. Americans love big, dumb vehicles. That's why they made it bigger. It's simple as that. Volkswagen's product manager says this SUV is the perfect vehicle for Americans with an active lifestyle who want to get out and experience the outdoors. VW will show off the SUV at an event in Santa Monica, California tomorrow night before making a public reveal at the Chattanooga plant on Tuesday morning. So yesterday morning, which they did, and it was a good reveal. It looked good. It's a good-looking car if you like that kind of car. And overall, it went very well for Volkswagen. And this could be the car that Volkswagen makes that challenges, say, the Escalade or challenges the Chrysler minivan as the car that people want, because you have the patriotism factor here in Chattanooga. You have the patriotism factor. There are probably more Passats here than there are in Germany in terms of people driving them around. I mean, come on. People drive Passats like it's a badge of honor. People love their Passats around here. People love their German cars. And the Volkswagen plant has the benefit of wanting it to be so that anyone who works at the VW plant can afford to buy themselves a new VW car, assuming that it's financed and assuming that you're going to pay like 3% interest and yada yada. But for the most part, they want you to be able to buy your brand new VW car and comfortably afford to pay for it while also paying for groceries and gas and all the other stuff you need to keep working for VW. So it's a good idea. It's a good concept. Now, I'm not a car guy. I know what I like, but I'm not a car guy. And I will say I'm not a huge fan of how it looks because it's got this weird, not really retro futurist, but it's got this weird like, okay, you know power tools, right? You know how DeWalt has these weird like blocky overmolded plastic like power drills and things, and they look like toys, they look like Transformers. That's how a lot of new cars look to me for some reason. And I think that whole fad started probably in the mid 2000s. And to me, like the 90s were the last, early 2000s. The early 2000s were the last good decade or good era of like cool car design that I could get behind in terms of the exterior. Now they all look like either electric shavers or some sort of odd tool made by Ryobi or something. I'm just not a fan of modern body design. But that's me. You know, I have my opinion, and you can have your opinion, and that's cool because we can all agree the VW SUV is probably going to be a pretty good car, and hopefully it doesn't have some sort of fatal issue that requires a recall and requires VW to have to pay several more $1 billion because their SUV screws up. So hopefully that doesn't happen. I don't think it will. And it's also extremely cool. It's being made here in Chattanooga. That's a big plus. They get a big A+ for it being made here. It's an actual American car. And it's probably more American, oddly enough, than a lot of GM cars. I don't know how many of the parts are made in China inside the VW, but probably not very many. So funnily enough, it might actually be at least more European than some of the GM cars are, or the Ford cars for that matter. And probably Toyotas are more American than some of the American cars at this point. But yeah, I don't know much about car manufacture, I will freely admit. But I've noticed that a lot of the parts seem to be made in Southeast Asia somewhere, interestingly enough. But that's my take on the VW. I think it's going to be a pretty cool car. I'm glad that the reveal happened yesterday and that it went off with a pretty good success. I know people who work at VW, about 2 or 3 people who work at VW in vehicle assembly, and they're all really excited about the SUV. Obviously, they can't talk about it, but they're really excited about the SUV and how it's probably going to be one of the better SUVs you can get. So I'm not a fan of SUVs. I will freely admit I like small cars for small people. I don't feel the need to overcompensate because I feel like I'm very well equipped. So I don't need to buy a giant car or a giant Ford F-350. But even I would probably buy the VW SUV if I had the money or the need for it. So VW SUV, pretty good. Really excited about it. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com as well. We're also on the TuneIn Radio app on your smartphone. That's TuneIn Radio on your smartphone, where you can listen to us streaming live anywhere on the planet on the TuneIn Radio app, provided you have a data connection or Wi-Fi of some kind. Check us out on TuneIn Radio on your smartphone. That's TuneIn Radio on your smartphone. We also do Facebook live streams. I just ended a live stream on Facebook. I was talking about the VW. You can go back and watch that anytime you want. If you want to hear my succulent voice yet again, you can do that on Facebook, or you can do it on YouTube as well, because we record most of our shows on Facebook and YouTube. So you can go to youtube.com right now, search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you will see me talking into a microphone in our studio and looking really cool while doing it. I think I'm wearing what shirt am I wearing? I think it's an American Eagle. I can't read what it says because I can't read upside down things. I think it's an American Eagle shirt that I got secondhand. But I look pretty cool today. So check me out on YouTube. That's Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube, and you can watch me bloviate about how cool I look. Google Fiber wanted to be the competitor to EPB. EPB pulled off a lot of stuff before Google did, and that's really impressive for Chattanooga. That's amazingly impressive for Chattanooga. But EPB has the benefit of being local. Now, EPB, there are a lot of issues I have with EPB, how it's structured, how it works, how it's funded, right? Because it's sort of a private-public corporation. Not a big fan of that idea, but it works. And I think the only reason it works is because it's here in Chattanooga. If it were a national program, it would crash and burn immediately. Like PBS or NPR, it would crash and burn immediately. It would have mediocre content, and it would have mediocre speed, and it would be bad. But it's here in Chattanooga where you have people who really care about the infrastructure. You have people who really care about giving people good service and competing with the not-so-good entities such as Comcast and Verizon and Charter and all the others. And I have used all of those. I think Charter's probably the better one out of all of them, but I'm not endorsing them by any means. And the thing with that, too, by the way, is we complain about EPB being a public-private agreement, but when it comes right down to it, so is Comcast and so is Verizon and so is Charter, because they all have to get government funding and government permission to do basically everything. That's the thing about them. They get government money in one way or another to do everything they do. Because when you are a telephone company or you are an internet service provider, there's a lot of public agreement that has to happen. And by that, I mean you have to get tax breaks, you have to get public funding from different governments, city and state and county, to get your stuff built. Plain and simple. You got to get a lot of money to get your stuff built. And if you can take, I'll put it this way, if you can take public money, you're going to take public money. Because if you own a company that has any way at all to not spend money, you'd be an idiot to not take that opportunity. And so the companies like Charter and like Comcast famously here and like Verizon take government money and run with it in order to fund giant projects that end up failing miserably. But they do provide service to people in the boonies, which EPB cannot do at the moment. There are people in, I believe, Grundy County who are complaining that they don't have high-speed internet. The thing with that is, and this is going to sound very harsh, and I understand that. This is going to sound like I hate people who live out in the middle of nowhere, and I don't. I respect people who live out in the middle of nowhere because they're doing something that I could never do, which is live without internet. I can't do that. But the problem with that is, the problem with living out there is, it's not worth it for the internet service providers to give you internet. It's not. So that's where things like EPB suddenly become, in the mind of the public, very useful, because it provides internet to people who otherwise it would be a waste of the company's time to give them internet, because they're not going to make their money back. I think about it this way. You have to do a lot, and I mean a lot, of maintenance on lines when you run them out there, because you have junction boxes. Even with fiber optics, you have junction boxes, you have switches, you have, and I mean network switches, and you have controller boxes. You have all sorts of different things that have to be maintained, and they have to be maintained by people who go up there and inspect it. They're linemen. They go up there and inspect it, make sure everything's going okay. They check out your meter, make sure things are going all right with your house, and they go up to your house to manage the network on a personal level so that they can make sure you're still getting internet access. And if you live out, and I'm not knocking you if you do, I'm not saying you're bad if you do, but if you live out in, say, Grundy County, where it's pretty rural up there, I'm sure you know, it's pretty rural up there, it's not worth it for Comcast or Charter or Verizon to give you that service, because they're not going to make a profit off of it. I mean, that's the point of having a business, is to have a profit and to serve the community in doing so. And Comcast or any of the other big telcos may be serving the community, but they're not making any profit off of providing internet to people who live out in the boonies. And cool if you live out in the boonies, but you have to understand, you're not going to get high-speed internet. And in some senses, I think that EPB not being allowed to expand is probably the better deal for EPB, believe it or not. Because, yeah, you'd have more subscribers paying for more service, but on the other hand, you'd have subscribers who are in the middle of nowhere who are going to want service too, and you're going to look real bad if you don't offer it to them. And so now you have this issue of people who are saying, hey, EPB now serves Grundy County, so why don't I have internet up on the mountain? And so EPB, sort of gets hot under the collar and says, nervously adjusting its tie. We'll provide you with internet. Yeah, no problem. And then EPB suddenly starts bleeding money like a stuck pig, and people wonder why. Because it's expensive to serve people up there. It's expensive to serve people out in the middle of nowhere. And again, no problem if you live out there, but it's expensive to serve these people out in the middle of nowhere, because it costs the company tons and tons and tons of money to do so. They don't make a profit. So now you have big areas where the companies are losing money. So if you've ever wondered why it is that it's hard to get high-speed internet out in some of these areas, that's why. You're going to either pay a huge premium to have them run those lines out there, or you're going to have a company that's going to go out of business really fast, or really quickly, I should say. And that's what would happen if, say, a Comcast or a Verizon or Charter or whatever decide to run lines out there. And you might respond, well, they have the money, right? Yeah, they might. They might be able to take that hit, but not all the time. Because if they do it for this area, it sets precedents for the other area. And the same is the deal with EPB. Tennessee is a great state. Tennessee has amazing terrain. Tennessee has a lot of things going for it. But one of the things it has against it is that it's hard to maintain infrastructure, especially on a technical level, in rural areas. It really is. That's why, you see out in Montana, people who have HughesNet, they're getting satellite internet because that's the cheapest way to get it. And that's something to consider, because they're getting internet, and it's not very good networking, by the way. They're getting slow internet with a satellite dish. So they would rather have a satellite dish installed than pay for this huge premium to have Comcast or whatever their local provider is, Quest or US West or whatever, run lines out to their house. I mean, it would be insanely expensive to do that. Now, that's my spiel on why networking in rural areas doesn't work particularly well. And there's a possibility, although a remote one, that I could be wrong about some of those details. So, of course, the number to call in is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 is the number to call in here at Hot News Talk Radio. So if you are a lineman and would like to weigh in or maybe swing on in on your cherry picker and let me know what you think, the number to call in is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949. That was the benefit that EPB had when it first started up, and it's the benefit that it still has. It gets enough taxpayer money to keep it afloat, to pay for infrastructure, and it also gets enough money from people paying for the service to make sure that you get high-speed internet, really fast high-speed internet. So EPB works where it does because it works where it does. That's the thing with EPB. And there are a lot of people clamoring for high-speed internet elsewhere, and it's a cool thought, but I would say anyway, and this is my amateur analysis, I would say that this would cause a bigger problem for EPB than it would solve, and it would probably mean EPB would cease to be liquid if it is at all now. And the city would lose tons of money. Now, the city's been making a lot of really bad decisions that have caused the city to lose a lot of money. So it's probably a good thing that this doesn't happen because the city does not need to lose even more money. Now, if you ever want to know how much money the city is making, there actually is a document which you can read, which I'll admit I've only skimmed over a few times. It's called the CAFR. That's CAFR, and you can read over it anytime you want. It's the financial report for the city of Chattanooga, and you can read over that. And you can see what the financial details are, what money's being spent where with the city of Chattanooga, and you can look at the finances there. The city is a city. It's a public entity, and so the city has a responsibility to tell the people who live there and live elsewhere too how the city is managing, how the city is spending its money. So if you're ever wondering about that, you can always look that up at CAFR, and David Tulis does wonderful in-depth analysis every year that the CAFR comes out, the CAFR, every year that it comes out, he does great analysis on that. So definitely watch his show, David Tulis, who's live every day from 9 to 11, every weekday, I should say, from 9 to 11 here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com as well. There's been a lot happening in Chattanooga in terms of the high-tech world. We've had Airbnb, we've had Uber, we've had the potential Google Fiber, and we had EPB possibly becoming an entity beyond the borders of Hamilton County. And that has not happened. Possibly, fortunately, that has not happened. But what has happened is you have had Airbnb not being regulated. Well, at least sort of not being regulated. The problem with the problem with Airbnb right now, this is two very similar sounding things. The problem with Airbnb right now is that it's sort of stuck in limbo. It's a good thing the city council decided to not regulate Airbnb, but unfortunately there still is some regulation on Airbnb. There's regulation on occupancy, there's regulation on noise, there's regulations on all sorts of things. I was talking to a very important person the other day, whom I won't name for confidentiality purposes, but there's a very important person who I was talking to who was telling me about noise ordinances and just general code enforcement. And if the city enforced every single code that it put out there, basically the cops and the courts would be overflowed with noise complaints. They'd be overflowed with all sorts of different things. There are decibel sensors. There are sensors for how loud things are throughout the city. And there's only 4 of them, but for some reason there's still an ordinance about noise. And there's no way it's enforced. It's completely unenforceable. So why still have it on the books? Why would you keep an unenforceable law on the books? It seems kind of ridiculous. And more regulation is never the answer. Think about it. Do we need more regulation on really anything? Not really. So how about we stop passing regulation, and how about we just step back and say, the free market will fix it? This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com. Check us out on hotnewstalkradio.com and on the Hot News Talk Radio Facebook page. By the way, Apple sales dropped for the first time in 15 years. Does that mean much of anything? Probably not. They have enough money to last for 20 years without ever doing anything ever. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio.
Here's what